watching Talking Point on StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh. Joining us from Tokyo is Ambassador Ichiro Fujisaki. He's been Japan's ex-ambassador to the US, to the WTO, to the UN as well. An extremely well-known and popular figure in strategic circles as well. Ambassador Fujisaki, thank you so much for your time, especially I know it's past 11 there in Tokyo. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Also in New Delhi, Ambassador Mohan Kumar, he's currently the chairman of RIS, has been India's envoy to France and Bahrain. And in the current context of what we're talking about, has been India's lead negotiator, first at the GATT and then at WTO. Ambassador Mohan Kumar, welcome to StratNews, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Ambassador Fujisaki, if I can just get your comments on what you think is happening with the ASEAN summit that is taking place. This time, of course, because of the pandemic, it's virtual. And the RCEP that will be signed on Sunday. We could probably get to that a little later. But ASEAN, in the context of how China is behaving aggressively across Asia, whether it's off the waters of Japan, whether it's in the East China Sea, South China Sea, and all the way to the borders of Tibet and India, that is in Ladakh. How important, how significant is this ASEAN summit, Ambassador Fujisaki?
I think ASEAN summit is very important in light of the international situation you just described. China is not really behaving on the rule-based manner, and those situations. It's very important that not only ASEAN countries meet bilaterally, but in a group. And I think it's very important that we'll have RCEP meeting, and hopefully one day India will come back to RCEP as well, because India's participation in these organizations are so important.
I'll just get to a more comprehensive discussion on RCEP. But Ambassador Kumar, on ASEAN itself, and we've seen over the months and years how China is able to divide ASEAN, or knows the rules that ASEAN functions under, that is, that there has to be consensus. How important do you see ASEAN in terms of what's happening geopolitically?
Well, I'll go one step further than Ambassador Fujisaki. And first of all, thank you very much for having me on the show. I think ASEAN faces a terrible strategic dilemma. Hitherto, ASEAN has been able to conveniently have an economic and trade relationship with this behemoth country, China, and then have a security relationship with the United States. They have done a wonderful job of balancing both. In many ways, you could argue they've had best of both the worlds. Now you have a situation where they don't want to be pushed to choose. At least not everyone in ASEAN wants to pick and choose the sides. They would like a status quo to continue because they're having best of both the worlds. I think President Trump put them in an impossible situation where ASEAN was pushed to choose between the two. They will hope that with the impending ascent to power by President Joe Biden, President-elect Joe Biden, they will find a modus vivendi. And the modus vivendi, it's important to keep in mind that China's main economic trading partner is now ASEAN. Yeah. It's not United States, it's not Europe. So I think ASEAN has a stake in the region, and ASEAN would like to continue to balance these two important considerations and manage the situation as best as they can.
Ambassador Kumar, you said you're taking it a step further, but let me again put this to Ambassador Fujisaki. Balancing, Ambassador Fujisaki, is what Japan is also doing, especially in lieu of the economic linkages, deep economic linkages with China. So when we talk about security and how economic security for countries is also important in the light of, as you pointed out, China not following rules. How is Japan looking forward in terms of decoupling to some extent from China economically?
I have a little bit different view on that. I think it's not the act of balancing that we are doing, or ASEAN countries or India is expected to be doing. Our relations with the United States should be in the main, because we depend security on United States. That's far more important than just the trading relations. So it's not comparable. Are we going to pick one or two? It's very clear. We've picked United States already. But in that framework, we need not to confront China unnecessarily. So we have to understand that the base or framework is our relations with the United States. And I think many ASEAN countries understand that as well. They may want to play as if they are balancing, but that's not the reality. That's how I view.
Ambassador Kumar, do you agree? I mean, when you're talking about not confronting China, but then if you go back to a year or more than that, that not confronting was almost appeasing China, and we've seen what that has led to.
No, one could arguably agree with Ambassador Fujisaki that, okay, maybe it's not balancing. But my question would be, what happens if China takes actions which are provocative, or if China crosses a red line? And when I say red line, it could be in a contested island, it could be in the South China Sea, because a number of ASEAN countries do have issues with China, as does Japan. So I have no doubt that ASEAN and Japan will not want to rock the boat. The question is, if China has, let's say, a salami slicing tactic, or incrementally, if China keeps doing things, the question for me would be, how would Japan, ASEAN react? I take Ambassador Fujisaki's point completely. I think what he's saying is very logical. You can't compare dollars and cents with national security. I agree. You have to put national security ahead of dollars and cents. But I think we are looking at a China which during this pandemic period has opened so many fronts. It's not just one country or the other. China has actually asserted itself with many, many countries. So they seem to be ready to have this multi-front battle with so many countries. So we will have to wait and see. I don't expect ASEAN, Japan, or even India to rock the boat. What I'm asking is, what happens if China crosses a particular red line? And the problem is, Amitabh, different countries will have different red lines. The red line for India will not be the same as the red line for Japan. And the red line for Japan will not be the red line for Vietnam. So that is where we get into a complex strategic regional situation, I think.
Ambassador Fujisaki, if you want to comment, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I think especially because China is pushing the envelope very far now on these rule issue, we have to depend on the United States. Yesterday, Mr. Suga made a telephone call to Mr. President-elect Biden, and in that Mr. Biden assured Japan that United States will abide by to security treaty and the disputed island. From our point, it's not disputed, but the island which China is trying to come into our territorial water very often, Senkaku, is covered by that security treaty. It was clearly stated, and that gave a lot of assurance to Japanese. And that's exactly the point I was making. When these things are happening, then you have to put security first and try to have these assurances from United States, and that has worked. And I think that's the most important deterrence we have. Secondly, now, if I think, in a way, we are meriting from China. As Ambassador Kumar said, China's diplomacy has been rather ineffective. They have been confronting not only United States, but now UK, France, Australia, India, all the countries. And they should have targeted to United States only or to other countries, but now 300 degrees front. So that makes their diplomacy difficult, and that makes others easier than before. That's how I look.
Well, it doesn't seem to be changing China's behavior. Even we've seen the Quad coming together in another format.
However, if I may say, they were not like this 10 years ago, 20 years ago, because that is far more obvious from President Xi Jinping's regime. Up until Deng Xiaoping, they were following Deng Xiaoping's buy your time or whatever, and that strategy was there. By the time.
Ambassador Kumar, the point that has been brought up here with Prime Minister Suga and President-elect Biden, how do you see the US playing a role in that region, first of all, once the transition happens?
I think there is no question that there will be more predictability from a Biden administration. There will be more of a return to status quo ante with regard to allies. Japan is a treaty ally of the United States. It's not like India. So there is a commitment of the United States which has underwritten the security of Japan. So I think now Japan can have more comfort with an American administration which has underwritten the security. That should, in theory, give Japan more strategic space to deal with China. That's the way I see it, because they don't have to look behind their shoulders as they were doing now, whether United States will come to our help or not. Now they have strategic certitude with the Biden administration. That should, in theory, give more space for maneuver for a country like Japan, which is good for India, because India has to rely heavily on countries like United States, Japan, Australia. Even if you talk of this Quad relationship, if they have more strategic space for maneuver, I think it's good news for India. That's the way I see it.
But why are you using the word theoretically repeatedly, Ambassador? Do you foresee practically?
No. When I say theoretically, we are yet to see President Biden take office.
Okay, fair enough.
It's only from that point of view. I have absolutely no doubt that, especially, I must also be honest with you, Amitabh. I do not see Japan and ASEAN in the same situation, frankly. I think Japan will have much more room for maneuver than ASEAN. ASEAN is, first of all, a bunch of countries. Second of all, not all of them see China the same way. Not all of them have the same degree of interest vis-a-vis China. Not all of them have disputes with China. So we have a problem there. But you should not confuse Japan with ASEAN. Japan, I think, has a much clearer strategic perception with the Biden administration.
Ambassador Fujisaki, both you and Ambassador Kumar are talking about the difference between a security relationship and a trade relationship. But ultimately, many feel that China's aggressive behavior is fueled by the fact that it can, because of trade, because of the money that is coming in. So then those routes need to be at least trimmed, if not cut, if that's impractical. What do you feel about that, Ambassador Fujisaki?
I was not very clear about your point.
About how if you continue to have trade relations with China and such deep relations, which like for example with India, there's a huge deficit. The money that is going to China is being used to fuel its aggressive behavior, whether it's military or otherwise. And if it doesn't have that money to do that, it won't be able to, or its policy will be restricted in some way.
Yes, that's true. That I think many of us didn't think China would become this big in a very short time. Some American scholars, politicians say that when they had China come into WTO, they had some hope that China would become more democratic, more liberal country. But they had been deceived, and that China remained as China was. And so they are now reviewing the policy. I don't buy that argument. I think no one thought that China would become liberal democratic country just by joining WTO. But China, many of us thought that China would not become this big, this rapidly. So now a lot of people are getting a bit concerned about that. But I think we are, for example, Japan, our economy is very much interdependent with China. So what you say that the money goes into China may fortify its military, yes, that's true, logically so, but we cannot stop trading with China because of that. I think it's very interdependent now.
But Japan is aware of the problem, because even under Prime Minister Abe, you set up a $2.5 billion fund so that supply chains could be moved out there, not only for Japanese firms, but for other Asian firms. You're looking at other supply chains. There are other talks with Australia, with India. So you're aware of that problem. How far will Japan be able to go, Ambassador Fujisaki?
I don't know, because we had new government as well, and the United States had new government. We have to see how we do with it. And I think not too many people agree with me, but I think China may be looking that this is a great golden opportunity for them that Mr. Biden came in. They may try to establish good relations with China. If we look at Foreign Minister Wang Yi's press conference, he's saying that, hey, we have 4 principles: no confrontation, dialogue, no zero-sum game, no decoupling. That's, I think, a sign to United States saying that they are ready to improve relations. I don't know if it'll happen rapidly, but still, I think we should not assume that everything will be same.
Mr. Kumar, when you're talking about RCEP, and if you can discuss that a little bit more comprehensively, I know your views on the subject, and of course the government of India has also made it very clear where it stands. In the current situation, now we don't know, like you're saying, what President-elect Biden will do, but RCEP, does that not give China an opportunity to dominate at least that area, especially since President Trump pulled out of TPP?
Well, I think to the extent that China is not welcome in TPP, because the whole purpose of TPP, to my mind, was to keep out China. And so I think China will be happy at this development of RCEP taking place. However, I do believe they may not be all that thrilled with India not being there, because there was, I think, a fair degree of interest that we should be there. Japan, I think, tried to help us towards the last stages of the negotiations by trying to broker a settlement. But Amitabh, I must be honest with you. I cannot honestly claim to you that my view on RCEP has always been the same. I will readily concede that 2 years ago, I thought we should join the RCEP. My problem is different. I think we are not able to settle the issue of rules of origin with ASEAN countries and Chinese products coming through ASEAN countries to the Indian market. That was an issue. The second issue was non-tariff barriers and regulatory obstacles for our agricultural products, buffalo meat, etc., rice, etc., but also pharmaceutical products. Even for pharmaceutical products, we were not getting regulatory approvals in time. They used to take 6 months, 8 months, 9 months. And then, of course, we need visas for our ICT companies, for our IT companies to go and work. So on all these areas, my view is we did not find satisfaction. Having said that, I do feel bad because we did participate in several rounds of negotiations. Nobody can deny that. And so we may have given the feeling or the impression that it was all going well. But in retrospect, I'm not entirely unhappy that we have not joined RCEP for this reason. And then I will stop, because I know you want to request Ambassador Fujisaki for his opinion as well. We have 5 trading partners, India, with which we have $100 billion trade. We have ASEAN, we have China, we have GCC, we have the EU. The only country with which, or the only entity with which we have an FTA is ASEAN. So ASEAN, we already have an FTA. So my view is we should be looking to do agreements with United States and EU, because they are our major export markets. That's my personal view. So I'm not entirely unhappy about us walking out of RCEP.
The point that you're raising, let me just take a comment from Jai Krishna Bachchu, one of our viewers, who says India has an FTA. Exactly the point you're raising, Mr. Ambassador Kumar, with ASEAN. What is the guarantee that China will not use RCEP to redirect its goods via ASEAN to India? That's the point you're raising.
That's exactly the point.
We were talking about how Japan really wanted India to come on board. There was a point in time, I think one of your ministers last year even suggested that Japan might not come on board if India doesn't in RCEP. Do you see China dominating the grouping there, ASEAN plus the countries that are joining with RCEP? Ambassador Fujisaki, you can hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted your views on RCEP. Don't you see it as China giving China the opportunity to over-dominate in trade in the area, especially since the US is not present, and we don't know till President-elect Biden changes direction, if he does at all?
Japan's first priority was TPP, and we have established that. And it's a pity that United States didn't join it. We hope it'll come back, but I'm not that optimistic, because Mr. Biden has a lot of other issues as well on agenda, and that's not the first priority. Now, as for RCEP, that was not our top priority, because it was more Mr. Xi Jinping's priority. But then, if we look at it, that if in that region where United States is not there, or Canada is not there, and if only China is the giant there, and the ASEAN countries are there, I don't think that's what we wanted to see. So we are supporting that idea. We are in that, but we wanted India as another heavyweight to be there, and it's from India's point of view, there's a lot of, I think, economic issue that would inhibit India to join. But from strategic point of view, because we have a Quad, and because we have Indo-Pacific region, we hope that one day India would reconsider and join.
Yes, we do believe that window is being left open, that certain clauses will be there. Ambassador, just your comments on Global Times opinion piece, if I can call it that was put out not very long before we went on air, saying that India not joining RCEP is a strategic blunder that will lead to New Delhi's isolation in globalization. I mean, of course, we take the Global Times with huge truckloads of salt, but your take on that?
I find it strange that the Global Times is saying that at a time when everybody is talking about resilient supply chains. When everybody is talking about resilient supply chains, what they mean is don't depend only on China. That is the coded language for that. Let's be honest, diplomats will say resilient supply chains, but what does it mean? Essentially means don't depend on just one or two countries. And in this case, it is China. So at a time like this, I believe India has an opportunity to work with other countries. I'm not saying that all supply chains will be disrupted. And I think Ambassador Fujisaki is right when he says that everything cannot be changed. There are established economic structures which you can't change overnight. But I think there is a complete rethink about how trade should happen. When I was in WTO and GATT, we had friends of MFN with Japan, India, Hong Kong. Today, unfortunately, all of us have deserted MFN. There is no MFN trade now. All trade, or at least most trade, is preferential. It's based on FTA. So that is going to be a big challenge for India. India benefited from MFN trade, but as I said, we don't have too many FTAs. The only FTA we have is ASEAN, Japan, South Korea. Those are the only, well, we have some other FTAs, but main FTAs are these, and all of these things are east of India. So it is going to be a bit of a problem. I wouldn't take the Global Times seriously.
Of course. Not at all. I mean, I said truckloads, maybe like railroads of salt. But Ambassador Fujisaki, I just want to get your overall now. Where do you see the whole situation moving now? Of course, there is that imponderable, though we do think we know the direction in which President-elect Biden is going to take the US. But is the world, because now it's really the world, or the world, except for North Korea and Pakistan, I don't know who's supporting China, but is the world making Beijing sit up in any way that will change its behavior, whether it's in the economic dimension, whether it's in the military dimension? Is that happening, or do we need to do more?
I think I agree with Ambassador Kumar that now Biden team will be a more team player, and thus will bring more predictability. I think last 4 years we were navigating through the stormy sea without any charts or maps or whatever, and we were just depending on Twitter. But now it's going to be changing, and I think that's a lot of us would welcome United States coming back to multilateral scene. So, as others say, welcome back, United States. I think that's the basic. Now, Biden has a big problem because nearly half of Americans have supported Trump.
Yeah.
That's a huge number. 71 million people supported Trump, and in that situation, it's not so easy to push all his agenda. However, to have someone who's calling for multilateralism from White House is better than someone calling America first from White House. So we have to be patient and not really press America too much and wait till he comes back. He really brings United States back. That's how I see.
Right. But Kumar, on another note, when we're talking about ASEAN, and we've seen the India-ASEAN summit as well, which took place, the East Asia summit that is also going to take place. How important are these, and what do you think of strands like the military dimension strands, where we have with individual countries talk about, like, say, Vietnam or the Philippines, BrahMos exports or military exports to them. How important are those, even though it's not
so it's customary for India to have a security relationship with these ASEAN countries, also Japan and others, but that is bilateral. So that is not to be confused with our multilateral or plurilateral approach. What I found interesting in our Prime Minister's statement today at the ASEAN summit, yesterday or today, I can't remember, but he did say very clearly that while we are in favor of ASEAN centrality for Indo-Pacific, he has requested a cohesive and a responsive, prosperous ASEAN reacting to it. So we have asked for a cohesive response from ASEAN, which is extremely important. We have made a statement on South China Sea, which is very interesting. The Prime Minister has said that freedom of navigation and overflight. We have mentioned UNCLOS, which is the United Nations Law of the Sea. So these are important in the context of, for the Indian Prime Minister to say this at an ASEAN summit means that we are extremely concerned about this. Otherwise, we wouldn't say it. So I think it's fair to say that there is concern on the part of ASEAN and India. But as I said, I expect Japan to have much more room for maneuver than ASEAN. ASEAN will play a waiting game for some time. They will not be so easily, shall we say, provoked, because I don't think there is that much of unity. They will have to sort it out. So they will play the waiting game for a longer time.
Ambassador Fujisaki, if you want to take the closing comments, you were talking about President-elect Biden and his domestic agenda, which he'll have to look at a lot. But a similar situation is prevalent even in Japan with the new Prime Minister Suga and Corona, economy. Is Japan also having its priorities domestically?
However, the difference is that Biden's agenda is 180 degrees different from his predecessor. But Suga was a chief cabinet secretary for 7.5 years, on number 2 in his cabinet for so long. So it's not going to change the agenda, add to some of the agenda, like he's saying we have to do more digital economy, or there's too much barriers between ministries, so we have to sort of abolish turf wars. I think any government has that, but these things, and he addressing these, but not changing everything, just adding on. And I think we are in a way lucky that Trump is now not there, and Suga, because Abe was very skillful in playing. It's really geniusly treating Mr. Abe's Trump's relations, but not everyone can do that. I'm not saying that Suga-san cannot do that, but it's extremely difficult. And I think Biden's-san can establish good relations with many of the leaders very easily. So I think in that sense, we welcome that we have 2 new leaders there.
Ambassador Ichiro Fujisaki, thank you so much for your insight. And again, apologize for keeping you up so late in the night.
No.
But, we enjoyed this discussion.
Thank you very much for having me. And Ambassador Kumar, it was nice talking to you as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Likewise.
Ambassador Kumar, we'll of course keep coming back to you for more with your widespread experience. Thank you also for joining us on StratNews.
Thank you. Have a nice evening. Thank you.
And you can get all the latest news and analysis from an Indian point of view on our website. If you do like our kind of journalism, you can support us again on StratNews Global. You've been watching Talking Point. I'm Amitabh Revi.